Nope. Hey guys, sorry it took me so long to get to this, but hey, I'm finally doing it. So what are you complaining about? Am I your bitch? Do you think that? I'm not your bitch, alright? I didn't pull my hair like you used to. The answer to your question is, it depends. Sometimes a single ST, especially if it's a smaller plot line, who knows how to run all the NPCs and how to do everything that's necessary for those NPCs, is usually in charge of things. Now, in larger plot lines, we often have the lead storytellers or one of the primary storytellers corralling things, but generally there's a shared set of notes and directives which all the storytellers work off of. As far as the question of how active any particular storyline is going to be, it really depends on how much player interest they have. We view our role as STs as giving you guys an entertaining, fun time, and if you guys are obviously not interested in something and not having any fun, it becomes less active. The one exception to this rule is when players have done something that has consequences and they're attempting to avoid the consequences. In that case, that story is as active as we believe it should be as a byproduct of the actions, however irresponsible, of the players. I've played female characters, but I've never played one as a PC. I played them as a storyteller when they've been necessary. As far as PCs playing the opposite sex, I'm always kind of wary of that because of the motivations people sometimes have for doing so. And also, men playing women tends to come off as extremely misogynistic because they define those characters solely by their sexuality. This is not exclusively true, but I will admit that is our baseline as storytellers to be suspicious of gender benders of all sorts. Now, if it seems to be that there is some aspect of the character which demands a particular gender and it's a well-made character, then we don't have any policy against it. But often what you see is people playing men badly and women badly, because if it is hard, in our opinion, to, as a white American, play a Japanese man, as you've heard me talk about before, it is an even harder thing to play someone who has fundamental physiological and, depending on who you talk to, psychological and morphological differences. So it's, while playing someone of a different ethnic background is difficult, playing someone of a different gender can at times be problematic and disrespectful to everybody involved, and you can get into some really squirrely motivations. So we're wary, but we don't condemn it. We've just seen bad reasons for doing it. We don't. I've gone on in other videos before about how I hate the word storyline. We have a general idea of the actors involved and what they might do, but we mainly try to stay agile in the way we run storylines. For those of you not in the know, agile is this corporate term for not over-planning things. We try to adapt to what people want to do and what they seem to be interested in. The only exception being the aforementioned consequences thing, in which we don't let you off the hook if you did something, especially if we declared it stupid ahead of time and you did it anyways. Then that's just dealing with the cards you were dealt, or dealing with the consequences of your actions. Just because you don't want to play that you, I don't know, ticked off the entire Inquisition, doesn't mean that we say, oh, he's not interested, we move on. But when it comes to running something, we do whatever is interesting to the players and try to adapt to that. Then again, sometimes players don't know what's good for them and don't know what to ask for. But we try to gauge their reaction, the amount of reaction the game in general has. And if people seem to be more interested in one aspect of a plot than another, then we go ahead and emphasize that. First of all, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, I reject your thesis. The idea that the millennia-old standard of beauty was the plump, thunder-thighed woman is incorrect, and actually the product of some very bad education, some really bad feminist writing from the 60s and 70s. If you want to see the standards of beauty that people have held over time, well, I mean, if you want fat and thunder thighs, how do you explain this? That said, I see the point you're trying to make. My only counterpoint is that the move away from the large, full woman as a standard of beauty in European culture, which really only started in the Renaissance, is not the aspect of some sort of corruption by our modern culture. It's just that we have adopted a different standard of beauty, as many other cultures have done so before. Much like those Roman, Japanese, and Egyptians obviously had very different standards of beauty than the Renaissance Italian artists who preferred large, cherubic, svelte women. There is this tacit assumption that clans like the Toreador are embracing the most beautiful, and they would, of course, go to the most beautiful of their time. In general, though, we just let players play whatever they want to play, and everyone seems to look like male models and movie stars anyway, so... But we're not here to pounce on someone's fantasy life, as long as they're not exploiting the game solely to explore some sort of unhealthy fantasy life. So if they want to be beautiful and rich and all these things, and they have the appropriate stats, so be it. They can be beautiful in whatever they want. If I was writing a story about vampires, I would include not a bunch of fat noble women as being the only women who would be embraced, but I would include all sorts of body types, including ones that show signs of treatment which were considered beautiful once, but now would be considered freakish. Mercury treatments, anybody? Or perhaps foot binding? Archon is both a blessing and a curse. I like programming projects, but I work on the same stuff during the week, so it's often a matter of whether or not I have the energy to work on him or not. I am working on character tracking. I am working on a few other things. For the most part, the primary IRC bot commands are done. There are some admin side things that we're still working on that would only be of interest to storytellers, and only storytellers should know about, so we won't get into those. But for the most part, Archon the bot is done. There are some features I want to do. There's some features that sound like they'd be good ideas, but are technically forbidding. Like making it so you can just do strength plus brawl instead of looking up your actual number of dice. But online character sheets, online character creation, those are in the future. I eventually want to automate the influence system so that you just access it on the website to see what's going on. I'd like to add more of those kind of features that automate parts of the game. One, to make them more reactive to the players, and two, to take the burden off the storytellers to run them. So you want to know who to blame, huh? Well, actually, my first vampire experience was when I was 18 years old and went to a con called AggieCon in College Station, Texas, and I played in a LARP that a local group there had made. So I didn't really know the ST. I never dealt with him directly. I played very little Vampire Tabletop, extremely little, only a few pickup games amongst friends. I primarily have played LARP and online. And the only time I was really big into playing it online is on the old server Diablery. I was familiar with all the tabletop rules and stuff like that, and with the world and the setting, but I just never got a cohesive group together. I actually played Mage and Werewolf tabletop more times. I didn't like Werewolf. I still run a Mage tabletop every other week. So yeah, so I didn't even make a character. I was just playing a Caitiff Bruiser who was working for a brouhaha. But it was a fun game, and I ended up moving on from that to start playing in the Camaria Fam Club, and then I broke off, and it was during the time. It was sometime after that I started playing Diablerie, and when Diablerie stopped playing VTM, started playing VTR. Shortly afterwards, we started Sanguinus, and a bunch of people who didn't like VTR signed up with us. So that's pretty much my Vampire the Masquerade career. So no, not very much tabletop, and as far as storytellers goes, my first game I didn't really talk to one because it was a giant-ass conventional art. I think the question of how did the great Primal get involved with role-playing games has already been asked, but I'll go over it again. Back when I was 13, 14, a cousin of mine named Jason, he introduced me to BattleTech. I was already interested in war games. I had played Hero Quest, the Milton Bradley board game. I played several like Warhammer-esque games that were really popular in the 90s at the time. And he introduced me to a supplement to BattleTech called Mech Warrior, which was the role-playing game version of the BattleTech. So me and some friends who were already playing BattleTech started playing Mech Warrior. And from there, I started going to the local comic book shop called Dragon's Lair and picking up RPGs. And the first one I really got interested in and still play to this day was GURPS, the Generic Universal Role-Playing System. And me and my friends in high school almost exclusively played that. And we played just about everything in it because the main way we played role-playing games was to get together over a weekend and just play a one-shot over the weekend. So we played science fiction and fantasy and horror, though not very much D&D style stuff. I never really played in a D&D campaign until I was much older, and I'd already been socialized into role-playing games through LARPing, not boffer LARPing. I never actually played in one of those until very recently, and I can't say I'm a massive fan, but like Vampire LARPing and with GURPS tabletopping. So that's how I got into role-playing games. From my GURPS experience, I have a very heavy simulationist bent, and I know that because that system emphasizes good research and good realism. So yeah, from Mech Warrior into GURPS into Vampire LARPing is my path to Vampire Online. This is not typical, I've noticed as I've talked to gamers, as being how you get into gaming. Because usually it's either through D&D or through Vampire. I went a very circuitous route. Also in between GURPS and, along with GURPS during high school, there was Call of Cthulhu, which came out of my already fascination with the Lovecraft stuff, which I actually became interested in through reading Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy, and then I read that, and so, yeah, GURPS and Call of Cthulhu are still my favorite games of all time. I like Vampire. I think it's the best large social game out there. You can't really run a GURPS server because that doesn't really mean anything. The other game I played a lot of was Innomine. I started playing that around 18, 19. It kind of fed the same sort of urge that Vampire did. So yeah, that's how I got into RPGs. Call of Cthulhu. Why? Because it's awesome. Well, I've always been a big fan of horror more than anything else. I wouldn't be playing fantasy games. If I want to weasel out of this question, I just say I would play GURPS because that would mean I could play anything. And please don't get into a huge debate with me about Hero System versus GURPS versus who stole from who. I just like GURPS better. I'm sorry, 3 dice. It's real simple. In Nomine, without a doubt. And the reason for this is that Nominee is perhaps one of the best constructed games in the last 20 years. It is a fantastically built game. It perfectly merges world design and game design. The dice rolling mechanic is kind of iffy, but the dice aren't that important because so many powers just happen automatically. So it is a much better system in general. So yeah, I have to go with the Nominee hands down. Demon the Fallen is more White Wolf trying to be dark and edgy. And yet another example of what they did in Wraith, where yeah, they're called demons, except for they in no way follow any tradition of demons ever. So why are we calling them demons? It's my firm belief that every game needs to have out of bounds markers, and along with things like the prince and other in-character things, hunters represent an out of bounds marker. They're the reason why you don't run around and just change them, violate the masquerade, and do whatever you want. As far as how effective they are, I was never a fan of Hunter the Reckoning. The best book ever was Hunters Hunted, because not only give a great outline of how to play mortals who aren't ghouls in the world of darkness, but it made it clear what they had to do to in any way be successful. Hunters should burn bright and die hard, or be extremely cautious and crafty. And on our game, what hunters are is the you done fucked up button. And you've crossed a line when they show up. A Camarilla vampire in the normal state of affairs should never encounter hunters, or much less the Inquisition. And we very rarely run plot lines with them because they should be something that shows up and everyone is scared, as opposed to, you know, just your regular run-of-the-mill baddies. This represents the thing which almost destroyed us once, which is incredibly frustrating because, you know, they're all a bunch of meat sacks, yet you can rip them to shreds, but because they can walk in the day and you can't, you have this essential vulnerability to them. And that's how hunters should be run, is that they blend in seamlessly with everybody, and you should be scared of them. I pretty much wrote the thing, so my thoughts were just anything that was overpowered, too much trouble, didn't give you enough for the price that it cost, or was based in some intermediate form of thinking White Wolf was having, like there are a whole bunch of stuff from like the early second ed stuff which doesn't fit anymore. I also went after with Scissors the super power clanflaw stuff, lizard limbs for the Nosferatu, all the weird crap that they gave the Bruja, just because I thought it made it unnecessarily complicated, and I didn't want rules inflation and power inflation and all these other sorts of things. What Steph said in the actual comments about what to ban, it's like all of it is. I see the point of merits. I think they're kind of overused. So yeah, that was my thoughts. Was just that there's just some stuff which is too much trouble, never going to come up. All sorts of things like. Alright, that's really all the time I have right now to finish all these questions. I'm going to start up another thread of them. Sorry it took me so long this time, but stuff was happening and it got kind of crazy. I know I skipped a bunch of them, mainly because they're ones that were better addressed in the actual thread, or I just didn't feel like answering. But if there's one you really, really want to ask, reply in the thread that this video is going to be posted in, and we can see what we do. Alright. Peace. Peace.